Okay. Well, it's another time for some of you say by popular demand, some of you say that you find it very interesting to have conversations with authors of very interesting books. I'm not going to keep you waiting for too long, but let me start the story not from the very beginning. During the author we're looking at today, during his distinguished two-decade career at Shell Petroleum, he held key operation, commercial, and leadership positions, including as MD, CEO of Nigeria LNG Limited, Global Upstream Vice President for Shell International, Vice President at Shell Africa, and Executive Director of Shell Petroleum Development Company, SPDC. Now, are you still wondering who I'm talking about? Well, Dr. Babs Omotowa is a highly accomplished and respected global leader in the energy industry, bringing over 30 years of extensive experience across the upstream and midstream sectors. His leadership journey spans various senior executive and board roles in the United Kingdom, in Netherlands, Norway, and you guessed it right, in Nigeria. He currently serves as a non-executive director at the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited. In addition, Dr. Omotowa is the founding president of Nigerian University of Technology and Management. He also serves as an independent non-executive director at Stanbic IBTC Holdings and as a trustee of the J.T. Omotowa Foundation organizations, where his exemplary leadership continues to inspire and drive excellence and growth. I'm not going to take too much of your time. I just want to welcome Dr. Babs Omotowa to Book Chat. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thanks for your kind introduction.
Yes. And of course, we're not going to waste too much time at all. And we want to just delve in straight into your book, into that interesting book. The title of it is exciting. It's powerful. You know, from storeroom to boardroom. Can you tell us what that journey looked like and why you chose that title?
Thank you, Prof. I think the title of the book captures, I would say, my career in Shell. In the early 90s, joined Shell. And my first role was in a storeroom. I was actually assigned to work in a warehouse that stored the company's materials. And from that sort of what I call one of the lowest end of the company, I then had a sterling career that took me to the top of the organization and into managing director and director positions. And one of the things I found as I, went through that career journey itself was that there were very peculiar challenges you find in a developing country like Nigeria. And a number of the books written on management are typically written for Western environments where the countries are developed. And so the challenges that individuals face to get such a career and also lead such large organizations are quite different. And I felt it was useful to share that experience, share the stories, both the good ones and also the very difficult ones, so people can understand the dilemmas and what it takes to really lead with courage and integrity and be a successful leader. So that was the basis for writing the book.
Well, as someone who has actually peeped into Shell Company, I have an idea of the enormity and the complexity of that organization itself, and to have started from the storeroom as a chemical engineer. I know that you also went through a lot of management training, because if there's something that Shell knows how to do, is to train and retrain all those that come to work in that organization. What was it like for you? What was those training programs you went to within Nigeria and outside Nigeria that also shaped your perception of management?
Thank you, Prof. And I think it's a very key point that I also always tell younger mentees that I coach, that continuous development is key for anyone that aspires to leadership. And I will say, at my own period, pace of change wasn't even as fast as it is today. And I therefore say, even today, much more than during my time, continuous education is key. And I think you're absolutely correct. Shell invests a lot in the development of their staff, both at the very technical level, where there are very technical programs designed for staff in the organization in various technical and operations roles. And of course, as the staff then move up to higher responsibilities, then supervisory and leadership training become normal. And Shell doesn't hold back in the development of the staff, whether it's in local environment or international environment. So I went on several local courses and training and development, but also went on several international training and developments. And I think that was key, I would say, in the career that I had, and to get to the level that I got to.
Well, you emphasize integrity, and somebody, a little bird told me that there's no way we can have this conversation, and that word integrity would not show up, and it has already. And you emphasize integrity and courage. Can you share a real story from the book where one of these values was tested the most?
The examples that I've shared a few times will be one around the helicopter operation. Uh, at some point in my career, I was leading a number of functions, one of which was aviation. And we had helicopters that provide support to shell facilities offshore, onshore, and remote locations. But by that time, operations had gone on for nearly 50 years, and the company still continued to use an international helicopter organization. And rightly so. I mean, safety is paramount in helicopter operations. But we were also very focused on developing local capacity. And so in that role, I then started to look around to find helicopter companies that may be able to provide that locally. We found about two of them. We then tasked them to work towards meeting our technical standards, part of which will require them to also have technical partners, by the way. And so two of them over a 2-year period worked very hard. And at the end of the 2 years, we brought our technical experts from our London office who came and audited them and gave them a pass mark that they were fit to provide the service. And so we went to a commercial tender, and one of the local companies then won that tender. And I think that was a moment of surprise for many people in the organization. And I recall, my line manager, an expatriate, called me into his office just before we awarded this contract and said, "I hear that you're about to award this particular contract. Are you sure you know what you're doing? This is a very high safety activity, and this local contractor has never done it for any oil company anywhere in the world. They don't have the experience. They don't have all of that." So I said, well, we did bring the technical experts to come and assess them, and they said they were okay. So we cannot now turn back when they've won an order to say they're not going to provide it. And he said, but if any accident happens and anything happens in this area, it's lives that are at risk. But you can be sure that your own career is gone if anything happens with this incident. So are you still sure you want to make this recommendation? So I said, look, I have looked at it all, and the only thing I see that worries me a little bit about them was that they were going to be leasing the helicopters. And leasing helicopters means that they're hiring it from somebody else. I said, I don't think is the most ideal. I think they should buy their own helicopters so that it's brand new. They are much safer, but they don't have the money. So I'm going to make a recommendation that we actually loan them the money at no interest. And they said, are you for real? I'm telling you, we're worried about a company providing the service, and you're now saying you're going to ask us to give them a loan and at zero interest. So I said, yes, that's exactly what I think we need to do. And, I'm prepared with that. I will be prepared to fully back this up and say, we'll go ahead. If anything happens, which I believe there should be nothing happen, then I'm happy that my career can be on the line. So he said, well, I've explained to you, I've given you all the concerns. If you still want to go ahead, feel free. And that's what exactly I did. And we went ahead, we secured the loan for them. They bought brand new helicopters. And, they flew for the first 7 years of the contract, no incident. Their commercial bid was several hundreds of millions of dollars cheaper. They repaid back all the loans. And by then, they had actually started to provide support to other oil and gas companies in the country and actually outside Nigeria. So I think that was an example of being able to stand strong behind a conviction, looked at it from a risk perspective, and put mitigations in place, and then it went well.
You see, every time I have had interactions with leaders, my major concern is, where do you find that visionary power? Where do you find the courage to stand by such and not quiver? What in you or in your upbringing allowed you to be able to stand and look at your boss in the eye and say, I am going with this? How does it happen? That's the difference between leaders and the rest of us. The fact that you have that courage, you have that conviction. Where does it come from? Is it spiritual? Is it metaphysical? Is it intellectual? Maybe you can break it down, because you have reflected on your life. Where does that kind of courage come from?
Very interesting question to ask. And I don't think I don't have a silver bullet for that to say this is exactly where it comes. But I think it goes back, as you mentioned, to background as well. And, I recall vividly growing up, as a young child, and, parents were quite influential in my value system. And and I picked a number of the values, including integrity, from my parents. And one of the things that I will say very early on struck me was how well my father was in being able to walk the path that others didn't walk. And that in itself, for me, was a sign of courage to stand for your conviction, even when others may go in the opposite direction. And it became clear that to succeed in life, one must be able to, one, take things to a higher level. You cannot just do things for status quo, and that will be enough. And every time you then need to take something to the next level, it must come with some risk. And that risk, you then need to think about it carefully, because it's not about overzealousness or about recklessness. That's not courage. That's just irresponsibility. So you have to think about that from a risk perspective, and then think about what do you do to mitigate the risk. So in the example I gave, for example, I saw a risk in it. I knew we had to do it. I was convinced, because I knew it will take us to another level, both in terms of developing local capacity where we operated, but also it was significant financial savings for the organization. But I was able to look at the risks as well and think about how do you mitigate it. So I will say, whilst it's difficult to put an answer to your question, I will say for me, the background and my role model as a child, who was my father, walked that path that others didn't walk, and that in itself uh, created for me that clarity around you must be able to take things to the next level, and you must have the courage to stand by it, even if everybody's against it.
Would you say courage is like what late Abiola MKO says, that the one in which we use his head to break a kola nut does not eat part of it? Is that courage, or is that boldness? Or is there a difference between courage and boldness?
It's an interesting perspective to think about. Uh, I think in some ways they are similar, but because being bold means you have to be able to stand for what your conviction.
Mm,
But I will say courage in my mind is a more measured a boldness. It's not boldness just for the sake of being a bold person.
mm,
It's having the courage, but also having the wisdom to think through what you are trying to do. So I will say bold and courage are very similar in my view, but I think courage comes with a deeper reflection and a conviction that is probably slightly different from just one bold. And as I was saying earlier, courage to me is not recklessness, it's not overzealousness.
mm.
It's a measured approach to an issue. So that's the way I will look at those two words.
Well, let me bring you back into your book. Many years ago, as a postgraduate student, I read that sometimes the American books on management, the management theories by Americans sometimes do not work abroad. In fact, it was a question: do American management theories work abroad? And something I had picked up from Peter Drucker a lot is that there's something about culture that also shapes management theories and practice. In your book, your stories are very unique because they come from a local perspective and they come from a cultural grounding as well. What would you want readers who are non-Nigerians to take away from this book?
Thanks. And I think your question is at the heart of why I wrote the book. I wanted those who may not have lived or worked in a developing country to have that insight into what it means. Uh, there's one leadership uh, context that I subscribe to fully, which is situational leadership.
Hmm.
Leadership is not a toolbox that you have and you use the same toolbox for every situation. Each situation has to be looked at from the context, cultural, people, and then you bring out the right leadership tools for that environment. Just to give you an example, Prof, and I said this to some of my colleagues when we went for an international conference once, that in a developed country, leaders of organizations typically spend, I will say, 90% of their time on value adding activities, strategic issues, because the environment is a lot more stable. The stable infrastructure, the stable judicial systems, even parliament legislators are a bit more stable. But in developing countries, a leader might find himself spending 60% of his time on what I would consider non-value adding activities for the organization. You have to deal with communities that have not been provided the basic infrastructures by the government. You have to deal with legislators that are wanting to find out a lot of things about your organizations. You're dealing with regulators that are not as mature as they should be. So you actually find that you're spending 60% of your time defending the value, whereas it's only about 40% of your time you spend creating value. The challenge, of course, is if you don't defend value and you're just trying to create value, your organization will suffer huge losses. Uh, and so it's important to understand from a perspective of someone who has never worked in a developing country such as Nigeria, to understand that you will have a lot of what I call need to defend value beyond what you need to do in a developed country. But it's consistent, as I said, with situational leadership. Situational leadership in the sense that you have to understand the situation, you have to look at the environment, you have to look at what you are dealt with, and bring out the right leadership toolkit for that particular situation.
Well, I have always been told that the strength of a chain is always measured by its weakest points. And that's why I would like to find out from you, what was one of your lowest moments in your career that you talk about in the book, and how did you bounce back?
An interesting one. So I think there were two really. One internal, I will say, and the one a bit external were two low points, and they were both during my time as at Nigeria LNG. I think in the internal one, it was around the reorganization that I had seen the need for. Once I assumed the role of the CEO and looked at the uh, organization, but also looked into the future. We were at a very high oil price period, but I also knew from experience that oil prices goes in cycles. You have the high and you have the low. And so once you are in the high period, you have to be planning for the low period. Uh, but of course, most people wouldn't understand that. In fact, in that particular year, we had made record revenue and record profit. And so everyone, including the board and staff and stakeholders, thought, it's time to really, uh, live the good life, if I will use that word. But I was very clear that we were going to face a challenge. I could see the headwinds, both oil price, but also competition from new projects, LNG projects in the world. I could see the whole energy transition impact. So, I started to prepare for that. And part of that preparation were doing things, both in the commercial area, technical area, but also in an organization area. And so the reorganization that I had pulled together and gone to the board with was not approved at the board. Uh,
Mm.
uh, and that, of course, was a big setback. And uh, it was quite an interesting one because of course, I did go back to the board. The main issue I reflected on was maybe it was too big for the board to see to go at once. So I went back, of course, with a three-phased approach, which was agreed and approved at the board. But the lesson I learned from that was a deeper lesson around understanding stakeholders and understanding stakeholders in terms of their concerns and being able to really work through. Um, Leaders sometimes don't have the benefit of hindsight. And sometimes a lot of water may have gone under the bridge before your time. It's important to understand such context, otherwise, it could come back even during your time. because some of the relationships may be a lot more strained than you had actually understood. So I came to learn that lesson very strongly. The other one was an external one. At some point, we got a government regulator wanting to impose a fine on the wanted to impose a fee on the organization. And we were very clear that we had um, an incentive scheme that had been signed into law for the company that prevented new agencies from putting new fees on the organization. But the agency wouldn't accept that, and at some point resorted to brute force and use military gunboats to block our operation. Took us quite some time. We went to court and we were able to finally get them to leave after a while. But this, of course, had affected our production. And we did win the case later on and finally and were to get enough repayment for all the losses. But I also learned from that experience that, sometimes in these developing countries, interest groups may go as high as it gets in the country. And in our own case, even the president of the country was unable to do anything to remove this blockade, despite that the government owned the majority shares in the company. So again, some deep lessons around in developing countries. There are sometimes much more deeper interest, and you have to navigate through that probably in a different way than you will do in a developed country.
Hmm. Well, we haven't talked a lot about the storeroom because the storeroom looks might be a little boring, but the boardroom is always an interesting place. It's like a field of play. And somebody did tell me sometime that the organizational culture in Shell, because of the Dutch and the English, that there was some kind of tension. Now, if you're going to look back now to see your foray in international boardrooms where there are different kinds of organizational cultures, how do you navigate such high tension differences between countries that see organization in different ways, but they have the same goal of making profit?
Thanks, Prof. Another interesting question, and I think what I learned in my career is you have to be able to engage all the stakeholders, and for the board, all the shareholders, and be able to find the common ground. There's always a common ground. It's not always one or the other. I always say that in the corporate world, you need to think more of and than or.
Mm.
The and is to be able to extract the value from as many of the various stakeholders. Because one of the things that's always clear is that they do have common objectives. If they never did, they won't be in the same organization. And that may be profit, that may be social, but they do have that. And I think once you are able to keep bringing the conversation back to the values that all of the shareholders have, you are going to be able to find the common ground. What I also find is very important is that you have time sometimes for some of these conversations, because people can get emotional around their positions. People don't want to lose face around positions they've taken publicly. And so you have to walk through all of that, finding, what common ground, what will allow everyone to be able to move forward. And sometimes the answer is not the most perfect answer. And that's one thing you also have to be able to come to terms with, that it's better to move together than to move alone. And
Mm.
so the best perfect answer may not be the one that will allow everyone to move forward. But it's okay to move for what allows you to make progress, because you can still come back to some of those ideas and opportunities. So that's what I found is you have to find common grounds. You don't have to expect all the time that the best answer will be the one everyone will coalesce around. But you use as much of an engagement and facts to try to rally around and then sense where the general mood is to be able to move in that direction.
To you, which of these words do you use often? Consensus or compromise?
It's consensus. Uh, Compromise is one that I always say, um, if not well understood, could go into, um, you know, could go into the wrong path. I mean, where it's done very, very well can have its value. And the advantage of it, of course, is that it allows you to move with speed. But I would say of the two, we have an African proverb that I'm sure you know, which is if you want to go far, go with others. If you want to go fast, go alone, but you won't probably go far.
Well, consensus usually takes a lot. It needs a lot of skill. It needs a lot of understanding. It needs a lot of patience. And if I don't know why people do not include the word patience in your name. If I were to address you, I would say Dr. Babs, patience Omotowa, because you come across as very calm. You don't seem, you're never in a haste as it looks, but you get things done. So how do you manage this external look of yours that makes you calm, cool, and collected, like we say? How do you juggle that? How do you manage it?
It's an interesting one, and it reminds me of a story that I once heard about Nelson Mandela. I think it was the South African hero. And they said he was flying once in a plane, a small plane, and he had a few of the ANC members on the plane. And the plane went into a turbulence and it was bouncing all over the place. And everyone was very afraid, about what could happen. And Nelson was reading a newspaper in that story and he just never moved a muscle. Uh, and after the flight landed finally, a few of them went to him and say, uh, you didn't seem to be afraid at all. You were just reading your newspaper and you didn't move a muscle. And he said to the individual, he said, I was probably as afraid, or if not more afraid than you. But I knew that if I showed any sign of fear, the rest of you will then go into a panic that if our great Mandela is framed, then we are all dead. And I think it's key for leaders to understand that you are always in the podium 24/7. Your organization, the followers are looking at you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and your confidence or none will rub off on them in a big way. And as a leader, you have to inspire confidence. You have to inspire hope. Doesn't mean you are not going through your own struggles, but you understand your responsibility for the larger followers. That requires you to have some level of confidence, and some level of patience, as you say it, so that others will also continue to work towards that objective. And you have to finally, I would say, it's back to what I said earlier on situational leadership. Of course, it's not in everything that you will do consensus. I mean, when there's an emergency, life at risk, the whole company at risk, then you have to move very, very fast. So, in cases of emergencies or life-threatening situations or very, very, situations that could destroy the organization, then you have to be able to move very fast. And that in itself You have to be able to explain to everybody that in this case, we just have to move very fast. We might not have everybody's view reflected in the final decision, but the overall life that we need to protect or the company's existence that we need to defend means we have to move with a decision. So that ability to know when to move into, very clear decision making, you should be clear about that. But I would say in the main, emergencies are not something that happens every time. In the main, you should still try and get the whole organization, the whole team, the whole shareholders on board.
Well, one thing is obvious, that there are invisible participants in this book chat with you, and I'm sure you know one of them. And if I don't ask this question, I probably will have nowhere to stay after today. My accommodation might be withdrawn, and everything I think I own will be taken away. So this question is for the voices behind me who want me to ask you that for a young professional watching book chat who feels stuck in storeroom role, what message from your book would you want them to hear first?
Yeah, Prof, that actually, I would say the storeroom was one of the best places I learned a lot of lessons. Sometimes from the rear, one can learn a lot. And if there were three things I learned, one I will say is about emotional intelligence, uh, which sometimes people don't spend the time to build. We build a lot of our intellectual capabilities, but that emotional side, I think we don't sometimes build it well enough. We don't strengthen it enough. Um, because I will say that more than anything else was probably more responsible for my career. I will always say that I wasn't the most intelligent in the organization. I wasn't the most intelligent even amongst my colleagues. Uh, but I was able to put things in perspective and be able to take things forward. And if there were three things I always say to young people that I coach, I will say, one, whatever you are doing, you have to be able to deliver it well first, and deliver it without complaint. So if you were asked to sweep the floor, sweep that floor. I think it was Angelio that said it. Sweep that floor that it's anybody who's passing there say, who swept this floor? This person who's done this well we must find bigger things for him or her to do. So every assignment you are given, don't complain about it. Some could have complained and said, why put a graduate into a warehouse, into a storeroom? But that wasn't my issue, my problem. My problem was I have a task. What are the most important things for the task? And then I worked hard to deliver it. But delivering is not enough. Delivering on the job is not enough. You also then have to take it to the next level. You have to improve on it. Because if all you do is just do what everybody else is doing, that cannot be enough. So whilst delivering is your foundation, the next thing is how do you improve? How do you get things better? And you must be able to do that in every job you do. And you learn from others, you learn from, even new industries or area, and you bring those practices back into the organization. But in every role, you have to improve. If you haven't improved what you're doing, then there's no point. A robot could have been there before you. But the third thing I always say to young ones is you have to then build relationships. Relationships are very important. Relationships is what helps to make your job lighter. If you don't have the relationships, your job will be very difficult because nobody is ready to, cooperate with you, work with you, or help you to, or give you ideas. So I will always say to a young person that my experience from the boardroom is one, know what your role is and deliver it, irrespective of what it is. Deliver on the two, three most important things. Secondly, make sure you think about how you are going to take that job to the next level, so that everybody will come and say That was fantastic. Before I left the warehouse, before I went into the warehouse, it was a place nobody wanted to go because the whole place was in shambles. But I tell you, by the time I was leaving the place, everybody wanted to come and work in the warehouse. We had brought innovation, we had brought lots of creativity, we had, brought technology in. The place was just running like clockwork. And as I said, the third one is relationship. So I will say for young people, don't many sometimes get disoriented. They don't like the job they are doing. They think it's too low level for them. If you complain about the job you're doing, your supervisors will already start to think, you don't have the right attitude. So make sure you just deliver. Forget about the noise. Deliver. It will give you your next job because it's how well you do one that determines the next one.
Well, there is a woman, I love her words, and she's Mrs. Or Bishop Margaret Idahosa. She would always say that your attitude would determine your altitude. And I think that what you have just said to the young professionals who would watch this program is that you must create the right attitude, to go higher. And somebody has also said that your network will determine your net worth. These are cliches, but you have brought them out in a way that they're very, very practical. I would love to end it here, but because the background you have there says NUTM, the Nigerian University of Technology and Management, what I want you to do is to promote your book, but at the same time, since we have a backdrop that has been staring at all of us, would you like to say a few things about how this venture of yours has also has come as a result of your own trajectory, where you've been, what you've seen, and what you also see in the future, like the helicopter story you told us. You got a loan and they got things and they became big. You are the man who sees the future. So tell us a little bit about Nigerian University of Technology and Management. Do you call it NUMT, or do you just say NUTM?
We just say NUTM.
Okay. So tell us
Yes.
a little bit about that story.
Yes. So as a background, as you rightly asked, I come from a home where my parents were both teachers. And I actually started my career before joining Shell as a teacher. My first few years of working was teaching in a college. And whilst I also worked through Shell, for me, the most important thing was about the impact people could make, and that the success of anything boils down to people. No matter what technology or what investments you do, if you don't have the right quality of people, then it will be very difficult to achieve. So I spent a lot of my time there also mentoring and coaching people. But one of the things we saw leading organizations like I did was that many of the graduates that were coming out of Nigerian universities, we had to then retrain them, sometimes for 1 or 2 years before we could deploy them. And as we looked deeper at it, two things became clear. One was that many of them were the teaching methods in many universities were one that was of memorization and regurgitation. And the sort of critical thinking, problem solving abilities were not being developed well in our universities. The second thing we saw also was that in terms of the uh, ability to think wider, that sort of liberal arts approach to teaching was also not in our universities in Nigeria. And when you then look at it, there was no Nigerian university in the top 300 universities in the world at the time we started looking at this problem. Yet Africa and Nigeria are going to be responsible for probably 40% of the world's youth population by 2050. So you have this mismatch between this is where the youth population are growing, yet there are no institutions there are not enough institutions that are really preparing them for the future. And the future, of course, was clear. Technology was a big part of that future, as all organizations will be tech. So we started this university, it's a STEM university, mainly science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but we did also add management and entrepreneurship. So, that those two are also integral into what we do. We started it having learned a lot from the Indian Institute of Technology, a university in India that today produces graduates that have gone to lead technology companies, even in the US. And their approach to building this world-class university in India was to start off initially utilizing world-class faculties from top universities, Ivy League universities in the world as adjunct faculties. So you get access to the best faculties in the world without them being physically present in your organization. In their own case, they had a lot of Indian faculties who came back home for holidays, for sabbatical, and were able to teach. In our own case in Nigeria, we also have a number of faculty like that. But we have the luxury that today with technology, you actually can do online teaching, and that also works very well. The second thing we did well was bring industry as an integral part of the university. So huge industry uh, involvement as faculty. So half of our faculty are also industry professional, practical, and we also have industry councils to help the programs we bring and also help the curriculum and courses. But one of the unique things as well we do is that all our students, irrespective of the course they do, will be part of a capstone project for a year where we teach them how to identify problems in society. We help them to define that problem, work together to find solutions that are enabled by technology, help them to pilot, and then teach them how to raise funds, how to pitch to investors, and teach them how to set up companies. So by the end of their program, they have all in groups of 2, 3, or 4 are part of a company that they set up by graduation that they can continue with after graduation or not. As of today, half of them have continued with those businesses that they started. They've already, within 2 years, created over 1,000 jobs, raised close to $4 million in investor fund, and are really growing even beyond the country. So we're seeing what we're doing is working. It's creating new quality of students. Those who have gone to work for companies, the CEOs have told us how great they have been. So we are at a stage now where we are trying to scale because of course, you start small, you test your model, and then you start to scale it, and that's where we are. Our university is probably the only independent university in Nigeria because other universities are either built by the federal government, the state government, a church or a mosque, or one very wealthy individual. Our university is built by community, so we go around looking for kind-hearted individuals to support students with scholarships, support uh, uh, the university with equipment, and we've gotten support constantly, locally and internationally, to take us to this stage. We're 5 years in. We've secured a full license. We've started a number of programs. We're in a much bigger startup facility. We are building our permanent campus gradually. So we're growing, but I think more importantly, the product, the students who have graduated, 165 of them, have just been a delight. And that for me is the purpose and the inspiration that led me into the university to be able to help the next generation to actually have the impact that I believe they have the capacity to do.
I really sincerely believe, just like you helped the helicopter company to have an impact and reach out from your own organization to the rest of them, that just like a mushroom, because when my eyes have been stuck to your logo, and the T in the logo looks like a mushroom, and I think technology just like a mushroom, will keep growing and will be very accessible because it's easy to cultivate. Well, usually we don't take this long, but I really am at a pain to end it just like this because there's a lot more to talk about. And also, one day you probably might be passing through Florida and you will check out the innovation hub at the University of Florida and the industry readiness that some of the universities in Europe are preaching, because I hear a lot of resonance from what you're saying on that. Because this is a book chart and is with Dr. Babs Omotowa, why would I not allow him to have the final word? So what's one chapter or story in the book that you believe every person listening and watching this should read first, and why?
I would actually think it's the chapter on early beginnings, because it has the story of my values, where my values came from. And I think values are very, very important in the life of anyone. And those values are visible in everything else in the book. And I will say that because I think both for parents, I think spending time to inculcate the right values into children has a huge multiplier effect in their lives into the future. But also even for younger ones, understanding the impact of having the right values. It's also very important because those values become your guide and becomes what helps you to navigate life and being able to make some of the right calls. So I will actually say that is probably the foundation that I will say it's important to read. And where mine came from the church, came from my parents, and those solidified every other thing from that point onwards.
Well, it's time to reluctantly let you go because I'm sure you have a lot of things to do. And be sure that I've also been inspired to start to think of, well, maybe a paragraph or an article, not a book, um, from my life in the dark room and to the classroom. Maybe that's what I'm going to do next. But before I thank you for all those who are listening, who will eventually watch this. I would like to thank my dear friend and brother Ifeanyi Mbanefo for making this possible, and I would like to thank you very much, sir, for taking the time to be a part of this. And we hope when your next book is out, we will be the very first program to talk to you about it and you promote the book. And I hope that um, all our viewers know that this book is on Amazon and you can get yourself a copy. It's a very interesting one, and I wish you happy reading when you get it. And I'm sure it will serve you a lot. Sir, thank you very much for coming on to Book Chat. Until another time, this is KOLE saying, keep on learning everywhere. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Prof.